and want to turn it over to Paul to tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Thanks. Hey guys. By the way, Sean, I just want to say thank you for stepping up and congratulations on what you're doing with this group and how you're rebranding it. Love everything you're talking about. So I just want to say, just a shout out back to you. So thank you. Um, Guys, yeah, I've been on this call for a lot. I've known most of you. What we're doing today is we're sharing an idea. I'm working with Labyrinth now, and we're doing some fantastic things in this space of AI. And today's call, we'll go into more detail, is really to share with you this tectonical shift, this movement that is going on in AI, and how it's about to really impact regulatory. Labyrinth, we've been with them now for 2, 3 months, is focused on not just FDA, but regulatory in general, and we seem to be moving towards government and energy. Uh, when I was at the 10X, I met a lot of you, and I told you what we were doing. I did that fast, whatever it's called, and I did explain it. And with all the conversations I've had that time with Athena for the last a couple of months. Remember Daniel Barreto came on this call with us with one of the startups 2 months ago. Had a lot of calls with him. And what we realized that the demand, the opportunity to bring for AI to impact what we do with the FDA so that everybody wins, right? The FDA gets better, all gets companies with more compliance. We, the consultants, we, the business leaders, can actually bring an acceleration with efficiency that AI can bring during the process because in our business, lives matter, people die, time is important, and the regulatory requirements go through the entire life cycle. We believe there's something here for us all to do in reference to leveraging AI. So with that, I want to introduce you to the team. We have Stuart here, who's the CEO of the company called Labyrinth, which is what we're talking about today. Harold is the CTO, and Athena is our subject matter expert who runs an EQMS company. With that, why don't we start up with Stuart? Why don't you say hello and a little bit of background and take it from here?
Great. Thank you, Paul, and everyone. I appreciate you making the time today. I know how busy our lives are, so I will be as efficient as I can. I want to just thank also Sean and this group for hosting us today. What we're going to share with you today is a platform and a pathway which we believe you need to know about because there's an opportunity for each and every one of you, should you be interested, to participate in it. And that's something called Foundry. And we're going to be talking a little bit more, and you'll see why Foundry is what Foundry is and where there's an opportunity and what it means. But let me start a little bit by just giving you some background. So I'm going to share a screen with you and take you through it. And I'm going to be talking through part of it. And then Athena Vizel, who you met briefly as well, will also carry part of it. But we are in the process of launching a new platform called medtech.team. And it is the future intersection of regulatory AI and medtech. And kind of for today's agenda, aside from the introductions, we want to share with you briefly a video explainer and what we call the ontology overview. An ontology is a design workflow model of how regulatory stuff gets done efficiently, with clarity, and with data-driven decisions. We're going to show you that. We're going to give you a brief background of what brings us today, and then we're going to share with you why Foundry is being launched, what it means, and the role that can be played with medtech.team. So just by way of background, I'm the founder and CEO of Labyrinth.ai on the right-hand side. We are a spin-out of one of the world's largest companies called Invisible. If you don't know Invisible, you should. They are the large language model trainer behind 80% of the world's biggest models. So if you would think, Sam Altman and ChatGPT basically wouldn't have existed without Invisible training their model in the back end. They are the behemoth. And they're invisible, which is kind of what their brand is that they work in the background to solve the world's largest issues, the most complex issues, especially where there are requirements for modern AI. They have launched their own entity called Infinity Constellation, which is a launch platform founded by Invisible to incubate game-changing AI services platform companies that are solving real-world problems. And one of those launch companies is Labyrinth, which I lead. And we're backed by Infinity and Invisible. And we are the bridge between AI-driven regulatory compliance intelligence and human in the loop. And we're doing a tremendous amount of work already with government and with leading companies in infrastructure, data center, AI, and energy. One of the reasons we're here today is that we launched at Abundance 360 only about 60 days ago. And during that launch, as you can imagine, those of you that might have been there or know Peter Diamandis, they've got a huge and very powerful following in longevity, health span, lifespan. And we were launched on the main stage, and I was swamped immediately. And then in following discussions with Paul and members of medical, medtech, pharma, a medical device, we suddenly had a very rapidly growing pipeline of medical interest in medtech, although we hadn't yet launched that as a service offering. And so we looked at that with a lot of interest. And at that event, I met Athena, who's on the call today, and we forged a partnership immediately. And we've been collectively discovering what do we do with this incredible interest to effectively deliver an AI platform like Labyrinth, but not necessarily for government and for energy sector, but maybe for medical and medical related sector and the regulators that they work with. So that's kind of the background. To give you a feel for what Labyrinth does, I'm going to quickly play for you the demo, but it should give you a pretty solid idea of kind of what we bring to the table. Oh, I'm just going to pause it there for a sec because we're going to look at this in a minute. So don't feel rushed to look at it. But what you're about to see in the remainder of the video is how we deploy for permitting. Now, I know you're not a permitting group, but I want you to imagine you were to just swap out any medical regulatory use case and workflow for what you're about to see, and that'll give you a feel for it.
Did I just see that it was based on Google, or was that my Mac?
Nelly, I'll answer that for you right now. Great question. Thank you. So we can plug into any number of I'm just going to stop share so I can see you. There we go. That was Nelly, correct, to ask that question?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, we're going to do a full Q&A at the end, but I'm happy to just jump in on that. We can plug into any one of the models. And so we do a fair amount with GPT, but that's our own custom interface, which is a layer on top of models. And we are a multimodal company. And so depending on the complexity, and an example of that would be where one of our clients is a nuclear company right now, and they're going through NRC, which is a very robust, as you can imagine, set of requirements. Those documents have a context window, which is so large because it's so much text that GPT is not the right model. So we would actually port that into something like Gemini, which has a much larger context model, and then chunk and then use custom built AI agents. So we are multimodal and not strapped to any one model. It based on the use case. Okay. So just to quickly go back. And so the reason this is so powerful is we've taken that, we've built what you saw there, which is called this ontology, which is that market map. And I want you to think of this as every step in a regulatory process from beginning to end. So this could be a 510K, DHF, ISO 14971, whatever that requirement is. And effectively the model that orchestrates in the middle maps that entire workflow a little bit like you might imagine a subway map of New York or London, England. And it's got all the stations, all the stops, all the tracks, all the things that happen in parallel and separately that bring you from one point to your final destination, which is an approval. And each and every stop on that kind of subway map or on that workflow ontology, we can map as to time, treasure, money, resources required, dependencies, user judgment, delegations, escalations, sign-offs, approvals, and they can be run through a risk-based filter. And the result of that is, number one, a market map that's data-driven of an entire workflow. And then number two, the ability to use our dials to optimize for time, optimize for cost, optimize for resource. And we're doing this live right now with our clients in energy, accelerating significantly time to output. And to give an example, our current nuclear client is comparing themselves to another nuclear reactor client called NuScale, who's $500 million into their filing with the NRC with 350 engineers. And we believe we're going to do it at our current client, Deep Fission, for $50 million and about 35 engineers. So that is a 10x improvement in time, resourcing cost, and acceleration of business. They've also got a $2 billion revenue client already signed and announced publicly. So we will bring them to $2 billion of revenue much faster than otherwise, which, as you can imagine, is powerful for patent IP, competitive risk, market access, etc. So what we want to talk to you today about is what would that look like if we created the labyrinth of medtech? And that's kind of being working title medtech.team. And we want to chat to you about why we think that's interesting to all of you and what Foundry is. So where we want to talk about today is that today is much more than the demo we just showed you. It's an invitation for you who are incredibly experienced in what you do, who understand the own ways you've had to manage these challenges, who've seen the system work and fail, but can now be in a position to potentially lean into a rising tide kind of lifts all boats approach in a co-creation fashion. And I'm going to pass it over to Athena now to talk through the next few slides, and I'll just move the slides for you, Athena. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the problem, I'm sure we could spend hours here talking about the problem. We all have our own experiences with the problem, but really right now the system isn't broken. It's becoming obsolete. And it's because we have so many different tools and systems, and it's becoming very fragmented. And really the root cause of a lot of that is because they're human run. There's a lot of interpretation that has to happen. We all have different experiences. Everyone in the company has different experiences. We've all had different reviewers, different inspectors, different leadership, and different expectations. So everyone's prioritizing things differently. Everyone is bringing in their own war stories and where they've been burned. And sometimes that starts to creep away from what the actual regulatory expectations are and what the fastest line is and where we need to go. There's also just a lot of manual effort. So even with all the tools, they still require it. They're only as good as what you put into them. And then they're only as good as whoever's monitoring them. So there's still a lot of manual input that's required. And there's also, it really relies heavily on the people that you have involved. So if someone leaves, you could lose like an entire set of knowledge with that person leaving. And you can go ahead and go to the next one. And so that makes this is not scalable, especially when you're relying really, really heavily on human capital. It's not scalable. So the example that Stuart was just giving with large companies and the army that they need to get things across. You're probably all familiar with the Venn diagram. You can have it cheap, you can have it quick or you can have it with good quality, but rarely can we get all three. And oftentimes we can't even get two. So a lot of times we're running in very lean organizations. We have objectives. We're doing everything as quickly as we can. And a lot of stuff falls by the wayside and we have to live with the mentality of we'll fix it later. And then later comes usually when you're preparing for submission or you're preparing for an inspection. And then it's a fire drill. And then you're trying to piece the pieces together. You're trying to do all the cleanup. You've had turnover since that point. And wouldn't it be amazing if this stuff was managed from the beginning with an intelligence built into the system? And because of this heavy reliance on people, it slows down the process. We get a lot of lost time with rework, a lot of lost time, possibly with rejection of submissions or with inspection findings, and it adds to a lot of cost. So go ahead and go to the next one. And so the shift that we're looking for is really, we don't need more tools. We have a lot of tools, and a lot of our tools are highly over-engineered. Like they have so many workflows. I have clients that have to take out the workflows because they just don't have the manpower in order to operate those workflows. And so we don't need more tools. We don't need more templates. We need intelligence built into these systems. We need support for the experts that are working in these systems, and also to take over some of the, I guess you would say, lower level, like QC tasks, or just keeping the guardrails on the experts so that we don't have to hire like 7 document control people. We don't need to be relying on our engineer to also be a document control manager. That's where building in the agentic AI and having the ontology built into the system to support the systems that are already there and to support the humans. We're not looking to completely take humans out of the equation. We need the humans. We need the humans there to do what humans are still the superior being at doing. But we also want to support them because I'm sure you're all aware we have a lot of burnout, a lot of turnover, because there's just so much expectation that is relying on running these regulated processes. And Stuart, if you want to go.
If I could just add for those people who are dialed in, if you're not 100% sure about what agentic AI is, let me just quickly explain that, because there's so many tools and terminology out there these days. We've explained ontology, which is just a complex workflow that's automated and mapped. Agentic AI is what has really become the biggest story in late 24 and all of 2025. And what it is the maturity of all of what you've seen with ChatGPT and Grok and Gemini, on top of what was called deep research, which are these reasoning models that could use what was called chain of thought to duplicate what researchers were doing. And so suddenly we had this incredible ability to go more than prompt to actually do incredible research. Agentic AI is the next layer on top of that, that gives autonomy to the degree you decide to an AI agent to actually follow a sequence of steps using these AI tools. So that might look like I have an agent that will book my flight for me after I decide where I want to go on vacation. And it would know how to reach out to Expedia or Kayak and pick the flight and your seat and pay for it and everything. That would be an agent or an agentic experience. And so what agents look like in our world is there are sometimes agents that can automate a process, just like filing. It's done, it's signed off, it's approved. You need to file, monitor for approval, and monitor for any feedback or questions. That might be fully agentic. And there are a lot of steps that we in Labyrinth world called Minotaur, because in a Labyrinth you have to have a Minotaur, and that's half human, half beast. And that is where it's half AI, half human. And what that means is what we talk about human in the loop. That is where an agent cannot act fully autonomously, but it'll do 80% of the lifting, with the humans doing the 20% of the oversight, judgment, and decision. So when you see ontology and agentic, that is a combination of workflow and agents working with human in the loop to solve the problem. And that's how we get the clarity and the velocity. So maybe, Athena, I'll continue with the operating model. So I think actually I just did. I probably should have gone to that page. There you go. That summary of that page. There you go. Ontology, structured, logic, rules, roles, agentic, executing, flagging, and escalating, and the human scalable judgment. Now, I can tell you it's probably not 33, 33, 33. I would say the ontology, designing, building it, and mapping it is the most difficult up front, because we have to train models and train the system. The agentic AI is an output, which is very quick, but has to be coded. And the human in the loop, I think, is running at around 10 to 20% of the time. But what you'll find most interesting about this is if any of you have heard about AI models or how you train a model, once you've trained a model, you do not need to train it again. So if you look at like language translation, once you've trained a model in Spanish English, it knows Spanish. And if it misses a local dialect, the one time you train it in that additional local dialect, it is now trained on that. It would never be trained again. So the models improve, the scalability increases, and the marginal cost of use drops every time they're used. So think about a living, breathing, learning system that every time this group would interact, or customers or clients or regulators, it's learned from the last instance, it's smarter, enriched quicker, and has a higher ROI because the input cost to get there is lower because other people might have trained it to the point you use it.
Yeah, but
Or
how do you calibrate it against, how do you
Go ahead, Nelly.
calibrate it? So you're saying it's learning from other users, but as we all know as a team here as professionals, there are people on your team that are users that you don't want anything to learn from.
Correct. And so your instance that you're running, and Nelly, what I'm going to ask for people is not to single you out, but if you want to put your hand up quickly, then I'll try and go through all the questions because I want to get to the Q&A at the end. But you make a great question, Nelly. You effectively, as a user, use a private instance of the model, the then latest best model, just like you use Word, the latest instance of Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint. You're using it with your data connected to your Vault, with you decide who uses it, not us. We update the model, and then when the next version of the model is released, your instance gets to use that next version. So similar to any software you might have used, but kind of, does that help answer your question, Nelly?
Yeah.
Okay, great, perfect. All right, so Athena, want to chat about some of the use cases?
Yeah, there's a number of use cases, but we just wanted to include a couple to get the imagination going. So 510K readiness, having workflows and assistance set up for getting quick to the end goal. So also putting in initially, like, this is what we want to do, and it's setting out the pathway for us. Also helping with the submissions, making sure that we have everything. I mean, even with the eStar, if you don't click one of the buttons, you might not get some of the questions. So the support that would be available to help get your 510K submission ready. Also managing design history files, linking inputs to, if you make changes to downstream inputs and how that'll impact upstream. So that oftentimes is where I can see a lot of gaps happening. And so something is managing that process. Risk management, that's quite the spider web, and change over here, if not paid very close attention to, impacts three things over here, and having an intelligence built into the system to support the people working in it to say, you need to check this has happened, this is going to be impacted. Audit readiness, this is something that really aligns with where I focus, and that is also trying to stay audit. We all want to be audit ready at all times, but we also know the reality, and we know the deficiencies with the systems we have now and helping keep us that way. And so staying audit ready at all times, running micro audits, and then identifying in real time where there's higher risks. So also helping us with that risk determination on what needs to be addressed. And then post-market signals is another example that also ties into risk management. So dealing with like the complaints, anything that comes in after, and how that's going to impact updates to the design going forward. So those are just a few example use cases, but really the list can be tailored to your organization and is endless.
I see a question from outer space from Faizan. So while he's got connectivity from up there.
Oh, good. I get to talk to the International Space Station.
Thank you, everyone. This is all pretty exciting and it's very interesting. I wanted to ask, what type of file formats can the AI analyze? Because so far, what I've tried with ChatGPT and DeepSeek, there are some file formats like PDF or Word, they work fine. But when it comes to Excel or something, it might just divert to somewhere else. And I wanted to ask, is it also trained on design files, 3D models, PCB design files? Just a thought.
Yeah, Harold, do you want to jump in and maybe share some concepts on that?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we're using the agentic workflow, because we use different models for different tasks. So some models we can use to analyze the tables, the Excel files. There's also new techniques where you transform those tables into a more like LLM digestible concept. In terms of design files, we're still testing a few tools for 3D right now. It's not the best use case. That's one of the moments where you need the human in the loop so far, and is also, for the moment, very expensive in terms of AI use to analyze images, okay? Yeah. So on the data and numbers side, that's okay, that's covered. On the image and design files, not yet.
Yeah,
okay.
And to give you an example, that one of the things that's really powerful about the tool is if you are going through an application process where someone has gone down the road before you, like I always think of Ponce de Leon with the machete going through the underbrush of Florida, much easier to walk down the path after he's done that or she's done that cutting first, right? And so the great thing about the way that the systems work and the way that we at Labyrinth, but it would be the same approach for MedTech team, is we can train the system on what great looks like from precedent and citation. And then it can pre-complete to a very high level a draft application, draft submission, draft whatever, using precedent, using language, using citation, and then flagging with data tags where it doesn't know what specifically from your proprietary data it requires to complete. And now all your people are doing is out of 100% of their time, they're using only about 10 or 20% to do that review and sign off completion rather than doing all the table build, document creation. And they're using our tools, which are trained for this, rather than your own GPT, which you're correct. If you throw a spreadsheet or something to that, there's a lot of hallucination, a lot of risk kind of doing this as a home kind of, practitioner. And so this is now where professional AI is being used because we can train custom agents for every single type of workflow. So great question. Thank you. I'll pause there. Any other questions before we continue? We've got about another 5-8 minutes to explain where we're going and why. And then we're going to open it up to more Q&A, but I just want to pause if there are any other questions. Good, I'll continue then. Perfect. So if we just pop back up to the document, you'll see we're talking about the use cases. And we want to introduce Foundry. So Foundry is an approach that I've used many times in spinning up businesses that I've had in the past. And it's a concept of pre-populating an elite advisory board prior to the launch of a new entity, whereby that elite advisory board acts as collaborators who help shape and ideate what the platform might look like, where they help define maybe what the ontology and regulatory language and expertise might be useful for, where we kind of move from what would be a siloed approach to a shared, more distributed approach, where there's a collaborative and collective intelligence. That's what a Foundry is. It's a pre-business launch entity or advisory group. And what Foundry members do is we'll probably have bi-weekly sessions, so twice a month, to learn, listen, and help you see what's happening in the state of the art in the business. And so one great thing is if you just might be someone that likes to see what's happening and get informed and learn, that's kind of where your value statement shows up. I want to see what's happening, understand the state of the art, and then take away and apply it. That's fine. We would love, though, obviously, for part of that joining for you to advise on what you're seeing, the problem state, the opportunity. We are, and you might be sharing insights on real-world processes and learnings as we go. There would be collective voting on roadmap features and priorities for the system. We'd be validating and refining effectively the first version before it ships, and you would have utility and visibility into the pre-launch version, which is a big value if you think about that in terms of maybe some of your own businesses and products and services. And you'd shape not just the baseline foundation, but also help shape the features and where you find value as a user experience. So think of this not as a pilot, but participation. But more importantly, we want to make sure that there's upside. And so we will be taking a slug of the launch equity of MedTech Talk team and allocating it to every single member in Foundry. Okay. Now, to give you an idea, this company will be backed with a minimum of $5 million cash on launch, and I'll guarantee to that. Okay. So the goal here is not to raise capital from you, quite the opposite. Okay. It's to ensure that we have the financial means to hire the correct engineering team, go-to-market team, and leadership team to deliberately execute on the plan. And Foundry is an advisory board to it. And we will allocate a portion of the equity of medtech.team to the members of the Foundry team. Okay. Number two, early access to models. You will be on the inside track then of what we're building, of course, subject to an NDA. So that's one of the requirements of being on Foundry. And then through that, have visibility on what is happening so that you could potentially get on the inside track of launch and accelerate some of your businesses. Strategic insights into AI infrastructure. What you don't know in this world can hurt you. What are the risk mechanisms, parameters, copywriting, IP, labeling, sorting, scraping, what is permissible, not, how do we do it, how do we do it well? And we'll be learning those from the cutting edge as well of all the work we're doing in energy and government. And then upskilling. Part of the great thing about this is some of you might be black belts already in AI. Some of you might be white and yellow belts, and this is an opportunity for you to personally upskill. I see a couple questions. I'll happily pause now and take them. Arlen, your hand was up first. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So in this Foundry team, what, if any, role is there for physicians or clinical end users, be they advisors or physician entrepreneur, AI startup entrepreneurs?
There are effectively positions for all, but those might be defined by subcommittees. So I love that comment. Now, to give an example, in the work we're doing in energy already at Labyrinth, we have already ex-NRC specialists who used to work for the NRC advising and counseling what we're doing. We have people that have worked for the DoD counseling and advising. So we surround ourselves with an advisory board. In fact, Invisible, who trains global models, has an advisory network of PhDs and global leaders of over 6,500 people already in model training, right? But there might be some in medtech, but my guess is what we're going to want to do with regards to this is populate our own advisory group. And so we would probably have a lead committee and maybe some subcommittees, which would launch over time, where we could bring in additional advice as required. Does that answer your question, Arlen?
So what I'm hearing is it depends, as long as the person like me or someone like me wants to participate.
And is qualified and shows up and adds value. Yes. I mean, we're not gonna be excited about freeloaders, right? I mean, the reality is we're all in this for rising tide, and I'd like everyone to, it's like a chain. I'd like everyone to link arms and help this thing forward. I mean, that's our invitation, right? We appreciate that we're surrounded on the school by extraordinary knowledge, and this system will be better because of that. Leonard, question. I can't hear you, Leonard. Do you mind unmuting? Thank you.
And I'm used to Zoom calls, so that was my bad. So I'm involved in standards development, and I've been just starting into ChatGPT very recently. And I just did a test like yesterday on testing it on a standard I use all the time. And it came up with some very good hallucinations, coming up with clauses that just don't exist in the standard. Yep. So the standards I deal with are copyrighted. So I wanted to know how you deal with copyrighted material. Like Athena brought up 14971, which is a copyrighted document. So that was one question.
Two good questions. And I appreciate you being so forthright as being a newer user. What I can tell you is I've run a global institute on AI training and prompt training for the last 4 years. So usually the quality of the prompt equals the quality of the output, and the quality of this data structure allows to reduce hallucination. And one thing we would happily do is with the advisory board is take you through a prompt masterclass or give you access to some training, which would upskill you dramatically, because a really good prompt is about 450 words, stacked sequence, and done under what's called a Ryzen framework. And we can share with you how to do that. And the moment people do it, they literally come back and go, "You've got to be kidding me. Like, I had no idea what I was doing on this model until someone trained me how to do it correctly." And the quality of the output goes from 0 to north of 90%. And to give an example, our head advisor, who spent 20 years at NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, I sat with her 3 weeks ago. She had almost the identical comment. We took her through training, and 4 days later, she's like, "This blows my mind." absolutely blows my mind, the difference between pre and post. So would be happy for you to kind of experience that change, number one. Number two, copyrighted material is something that we can talk through. There's a whole bunch of work in AI and Gen AI around IP and everything. And so I wouldn't recommend that people in a public forum share non-public IP, right? Because obviously it could be pre-filing or whatever and disclosure, or you could disclose against yourself sometimes. But with regards to the rest of the model, we have very strong guardrails on how to do it, when it's acceptable, and how it's done well. So we can share that with you again as a process. But we solve that elegantly and easily with the work we do at Labyrinth. So we have a roadmap for that. Okay.
That's great. And one other question.
Yep.
Within standards, since I've been working on them for about 20 years now, there are a lot of clauses that are written really poorly. And so there's a lot of interpretation that's involved in them because they're written so badly, to put it nicely, that you can get multiple interpretations.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a challenge within a model, I believe.
It definitely is. And I saw Nelly nodding her head. So I have a feeling she agreed with that comment, and maybe some others. And one thing I can tell you, and having spent 15 years building RegTech, which I've done prior to this, and I don't view the regulators as bad people. They're not a four-letter word. They're human beings who are struggling as well.
Oh, very much so.
Antiquated systems, and our job is to make them look like heroes. And so one thing I can share with you in early discussions already, and I've done this for 15 years with regulators, when we bring incredible technology, in the early days, it was like cloud and SaaS, and now it's AI, but we become enablers for them to get cleaner, better constructed, better filed, better cited, more easy to understand, and also written against what they publish as best practice, because we can ask them for that. As a result, some of the lack of clarity in the question asking and filing is actually more of an issue that they haven't updated their reg, not that we're not complying to their standard. And the model can learn what great looks like, which bypasses that recycle loop quite a bit. What we're hoping is that regulators start to become more AI forward. We're seeing some of it in many regulatory areas where they might actually go, oh my God, you're providing stuff better than our spec. Maybe we need to upgrade our spec or make our spec aligned with the AI. That will happen with time. Right now, I can't recommend to you or even endorse that I have the strength or ability to influence regulatory change, but we can demonstrate by practice extraordinary clarity, documentation, citation, in such a way that we make their job easy, and ultimately we think the water will rise for the regulator as well in the harbor. Okay, it's a great question.
Although I think, Stuart, I hate to interject here. I think really what Leonard, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leonard, is there are times when the standard says something, has a statement, and the industry has interpreted it one way, but it took a collective mindset to get to that standard of understanding, which then leads into business best practices. So, I mean, I think there's a chain of thought, and I think that's where Leonard was going. Am I correct, Leonard?
So a great example is with FDA, with Essential Performance and EMC. My partner and I had to actually do a training with the FDA to change their mind on how they interpreted that issue, because they were giving our clients bad information and rejecting their submissions. And after that training, our clients were actually getting approvals.
So
And we had 70 people from the FDA in that training.
Stuart, do you want to stop sharing,
reviewers.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm happy to stop sharing. So it's a good question. I'd like to finish a couple slides and we'll finish up on Q&A.
Yeah,
I will answer that question. It's a good one. Let me generically answer that, which is not of full service to you, but will give you a fair response. Okay. I'd love to continue this conversation in one of our Foundry meetings, number one. So I'm not trying to write it off. I'm saying I'd love to do it. Okay.
No.
But number two, I would submit the following, that Leonard, you and your partner and the people working on this, and Nelly, who mentioned it, everyone else nodding, are trainable. Like, as human beings, we learn, right? We learn from experience, from collaboration, from partnership, from precedent, and we adapt and everything. And the great thing about that is, so do these models learn and train. That's the entire concept of what we're doing, is replicating that. And so if it's capable to be done in that respect, we can do it in the model. Now, if you said, Stuart, we've got a bit of a challenge because I stand by a patient's bed and I visibly evaluate them, and I'm using empathy, and I'm using my training for micro body language and facial recognition, and that's an empathetic thing that right now the models aren't great at. And so if I put computer vision in that room, you would beat computer vision, okay? Fortunately, we're not doing that necessarily for this regulatory filing process, right? We're using primarily learned systems that can update the same way your training would update. So does that make sense in a generalistic approach?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to quickly finish up. And so why we lean in part one, part two, you can contribute to a legacy, even that beyond your organization, shape industry-wide best practices, building an infrastructure for all, a shared solution, and share knowledge, not just frustration. I'm a big believer, everyone, that we are all on some Maslow's hierarchy curve to be better versions of ourselves. It's how I govern my life. I'm governed by impact. I'm governed by paying it forward. Not everyone is, but sometimes this is an opportunity, if you aren't, to actually experience that. And if you are, this is actually one of those mechanisms where we can really contribute to something that's amazing, because in some areas, if we can accelerate incredible life-saving methods, systems, and products to market, then that is great for all kinds of reasons, not just for the profitability of the people that are doing it. And secondly, we're talking to some medical VCs already who are worried that they evaluate early stage companies and don't actually know if it's realistic or not for them to get to market, and if it's actually going to, what is the runway, what is the burn, what is the likelihood of actually developing this. And by creating the ontology method and model, we can actually create data-driven decisions to actually help in cash management and in fundraising. So we're already seeing companies go, we need an ontology before we can go raise, which is really interesting, because now you can make data-driven decisions about what it looks like, which also helps on the investment and balance sheet management side. Real momentum. We have about 15 plus companies in the pipeline that want to do this, which is great. We've got customers waiting for a product. They will be ported from Labyrinth over to MedTech team. It'll be an inbound customer pipeline for the growth of the company. At recent events where Paul has attended and we've spoken, we've had more than 4 out of 5 people on average express interest in learning more, being involved, supporting it, or becoming a pilot customer. And RegTech and AI is in the top trending searches online, which means there's massive interest in the space, and there's yet to be strong solutions. Athena, Paul, do you want to comment on eStar and everything else quickly?
Yeah, Athena, why don't you do that?
Yeah, it's just the timing right now is, of course, impeccable, because we have a lot of stuff that is happening. eStar is an example, but just the modernization, where also the FDA is really embracing AI. Everyone is learning together, and we want to move forward along that path. So to what Stuart was talking about earlier, even how what we're doing can be influencing how the regulators are comfortable moving forward with certain aspects of processes, and where they will be focusing as well.
Great.
And one comment I'd like to make on top of that is that for all of us here on the call, that if you're a consultant and if you're trying to do more in the regulatory space, this could be a tool. Consider what we're building out, a tool in your toolkit to help you do your work better and faster. Like, Mr. 60601 guy, right? Leo, like, you could really lean in and help us all for that regulation, be the expert, and then leverage this platform when you walk into your clients as well.
Yeah.
We'd like to explore that, and that's the invitation. That's what we'd like to get out of it today.
So it wouldn't be very helpful if I'm telling you all this and we couldn't prove it. So any of you, this is just within the last week. The platform Infinity Constellation is being called the Berkshire Hathaway of AI services. They've just raised another round, 17 million. This is literally the cutting edge of what is called SaaS version 2.0. Instead of software as a service, it's service as software. And AI service platforms are literally the future of how technology will be delivered. And so don't trust us, but feel free, we can share the links afterwards. But there's a whole new deployment mechanism. And if I shared with you at the beginning, I'll just go to the top, but the actual companies behind it. So the entire platform is backed by Invisible. It's launched on the Infinity Constellation platform. And the new entity, just like Labyrinth, medtech.team, if we call it that, it's a holding name right now, will not only have launch funding of $5 million to get it up and running, but will also have the power of this group and finance, marketing, HR, legal, and everything is an integrated service offered by Infinity Constellation, just like I do at Labyrinth. I don't have any of those team members. I don't need them. It's leveraged through the group. What that means is medtech.team will be launched just with product engineering and go-to-market, which is a very powerful way to launch new businesses. So if any of you want to look at any of these articles as to why and how, this is the way companies are getting to revenue. And to give an example, the most recent Infinity Constellation business went from 0 to 10 million ARR in 6 months. That's 10 million of annualized revenue in 6 months. That's $100 million valuation in 6 months. That's what's happening right now. So next steps, and I'll put into chat, but there's a type form, which we would, if you're interested in joining and just learning more and becoming part of it, I'll put this into chat for you. I can't share with everyone. I think I can only share with hosts and panelists. How do I share with everyone? Maybe one of the hosts can share that link again wider, but it is this link.
I can share it.
Thank you, Sean.
If you send it to me, I will share it.
You should have it in the chat, because if you're a host, you should see it there in the chat window. And in fact, you can forward it to everyone. So what we've created is a type form, and the type form literally just says name and contact information so we can reach out to you. We are not asking for money because we have it. We're not asking for too much time, but we're asking for some. And we're offering an incredible opportunity to be part of the Foundry. And that window will close June 15th. MedTech expects to launch July 1. And the first meeting of the Foundry will be the second week of July, probably the 16th. That's our timeline. And with that, any Q&A. So please, thank you, Sean, for sharing that. That's the Typeform link. You're not committing on the Typeform. You're just flagging you're interested, and then we can reach out to you and go through a little bit more detail, everything, what it looks like. Ideal numbers, we're looking for about 15 people to be on Foundry, would be ideal from a diverse background. Okay. I will stop share and pause and just thank you all for having taken the time to listen and answer any questions you have with the time left. Sean, I see your hand up.
Hi. Sorry, it doesn't allow me to raise my hand electronically. The host. So my question for you is why MedTech? Why now?
Why MedTech? Because last night I was trying to come up with a domain that I could buy on GoDaddy, and medtech.team showed up and I grabbed it for my $49. And so we can call it whatever we want. It's a placeholder. But why medtech.team is medtech is like regtech. It's the field. We know that. And .team is because it's being put together as a team of agents and a Foundry team to launch. And so there is intent behind the naming, but that's what it embodies. But we can call it anything. For example, labyrinth.ai, we could call it anything.ai if you want as well. What was your second question, Sean?
No, my question is, why did you choose the medtech industry?
It's simply because if I went back to that page above, when we went out to market and we launched at Abundance, and then, Paul went to some of the sessions, including here, we've been overwhelmed at Labyrinth with inbound medical customers that we aren't currently taking because we're focused primarily on permitting, licensing, energy, and state gov. And as a result, we have an entire flow of clients and business and opportunity that we're not actually in a position to immediately support. And so we're launching a complete sister company to manage and support all of that, literally off the back of what we're doing. So it is to bring this value to this space quicker through a separately funded, entirely separately running entity. That's kind of why now.
And also just to add on top of that, because I think the focus it's so deep and wide that it's very different to nuclear, if you would, right? So regulatory just warrants its own attention.
Yeah, but it's not just regulatory. You've got regulatory and quality. Everybody thinks regulatory submissions only. You've got an entire vast pool of just quality management stuff that
Correct.
And
Athena came
that's my point, right? And then you look at what, and I really made the decision, and my feedback after I went to 10X guys was that we should bring this and fund it and do it separately. That was my recommendation after all the conversations I had with you guys. Because what we realized that it was so deep and so wide, the opportunity was so big. Like I spoke to Daniel Barreto, who was on one of these calls, right? The ex-FDA guy, and he was just rattling off all the things.
Yeah.
Athena is an industry expert. She focuses on quality, right? And then she realized how much it was. And then Leo, you educated me on a ride to the airport, right? It's like, wow, that is like I just realized like I did not know what I did not know.
So,
And
so
which said
Paul,
it's
yeah.
worthy of its own brand and
And
own.
to answer Nelly's question, EQMS and QMS is a big part of what we're expecting this new company will do. Athena,
Yeah.
do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, when I met Stuart, I latched onto him because I've
Yeah.
been dealing with this for years and just seeing where their intelligence really needs to be built into the system and how often I'm brought in as a consultant and the support I would love for these systems to give. And when I was learning what Invisible could do and what the possibilities are, that's why I really latched on to Stuart and I said, we really need this in our industry.
Yeah. And Nelly, to your point, the Foundry is going to be exactly discussing what is the wedge product, what is the initial launch, what is the demand, where do we go, how do we do it, how do we? Those are all the kind of questions. So I love your question. It's the right question. Okay, I see Leonard, Jose, and Faizan. I'm going to go with Jose first because he hasn't spoken yet, and then I'll try and get the other two right after. Go ahead, Jose.
Sure, thanks. I'm just curious. I mean, you kind of stated the 10,000-foot view of conceptually what you're looking at. And I think a lot of people think AI and they just think ChatGPT and a chat interface. But I wonder if you can speak a little bit to kind of the UI that you're envisioning for this, maybe what you've done in the other industries, and like what is that interface and that interaction between the user and the tool that you're envisioning?
It's a great question, and I wish we had time to do a whole hour on that, and Harold could show you what we're building. But to answer it simply, if any of you have been on a platform called Manus, MANUS, feel free to go have a look at it. The concept of Manus is like a more modern UI interface where on the left-hand side, it feels more like a GPT. You're asking questions, prompting, learning. And on the right-hand side, agents are working autonomously on the work that's being done. And so you kind of get a split window of, wow, here's my research agent kicking in. Here's what they're doing. Here's my validation, my verification, my asymmetric. So it's kind of like that's the kind of feel I think we're aiming for. But again, we need to meet the requirements of the customer for this product. And if they want a certain interface, that's the design spec we'll build on. Harold is a master lead on product and system architecture. He's worked with Amazon, Cisco, and stuff like there's probably one of the best in the world in product design and architecture. So the UX will be designed for the customer requirement and the value proposition. Leonard and then Faizan.
So two quick things.
Yep.
One is another area to look at, but I think it's a much longer lead, is the clinical area. I think is going to be something that's huge as well. And another is that regulatory database that I work with a lot that has done their own AI is MedBoard, just to look at what they've done potentially.
Thank you.
And I've been working with them for a long time.
So love that. Maybe an introduction. Second one, I love. First one, we're ready on it. In fact, Peter Diamandis' entire longevity team is focused on clinical, and we're in discussions with them already to maybe be part of this. So thank you for that. Team, I've got another call starting right now at 1 o'clock, but I've got 1 minute and then I'll let Sean wrap up. But Faizan, quickly to you.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. So my question was, what's the expected output of the AI? Because to give an example, when I was developing procedures for our EQMS, so what I will do was I will give it a clause of ISO 13485 and the relevant regulations. And then I will ask it to generate the mermaid code so it can like create a flow chart by using the code. And then I will use the code in the separate mermaid application, and then I will have like a whole flow chart.
Okay.
So instead of like starting from 0, I'll be like starting from like 80%.
So what I might propose is maybe Harold and Faizan can have a one-off chat about that. I know people are dropping and I don't want to let anyone miss. Sean, I'll let you close out. Thank you for letting us speak with this group today. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for attending. Run to your next call. Don't be late. And appreciate all of the enthusiasm and participation today. I would like to share that next week we will have, see if I can find the right screen. Guest speaker will be Ignacio Smet, CEO and co-founder of Eon Minds. who will be presenting his platform for MedTech patents. So you won't want to miss the MedTech patent event. Um, and I'm looking forward to that. I put a steal this prompt in the chat if people can see it. I'm not sure. Let me know if you can. That's a way of introducing yourself, a way of talking about yourself. Those of you who, like me, have a little difficulty talking about yourself, this prompt is designed to help you identify your expertise, bring it to the fore, and talk about it in a way that doesn't make you sound obnoxious. And so the goal here is that you all think about joining. Where is my screen? Um, uh, um, stop, stop share. Right. Stop sharing. Um, so yeah, please join us next week. And bring a friend. I would love to have conversations with anybody on the call about joining MLVX. We're off to a great start, and the platform is going live today. So enroll, enroll, enroll. Be one of the founding members. And thanks again to everyone who participated and showed up today. And we will see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.